Back at WNST, I usually can take a bye week and say, a little weekend out. The Ravens will be whatever they are, 6-3 at the bye, or we'll be feeling good about ourselves. Well, that's not the case. And at 4-5 with a gimpy quarterback, a semi-lame Dutch head coach, and the Cincinnati Bengals coming in here now. And Luke, I will say this. It is a different scenario here this week, given how the Bengals played on Sunday. I think that makes for a rosier forecast here for the next few days as the Bengals come to town, because they look like a bad football team on Sunday.
They've been horrible. You look at that defense, it has just been absolutely atrocious. And I know people kind of think back to what they did against the Ravens in Week 2, and I'll remind everyone, Thursday night road game, that's a big factor. Ask the Carolina Panthers about that this past week. But you do look at Cincinnati. They started out 4-1. Everyone was kind of thinking at that point it might be the Ravens and the Bengals, and the Steelers are taking a step back. And, well, we've seen how that's gone since then. They gave up 28 to Pittsburgh. They gave up 45 to Kansas City. They gave up 34 to the Bucs, who couldn't manage more than 3 points against Washington at home on Sunday. And, of course, the Saints made them look like a junior high team. That game was as lopsided of an NFL game as you'll find. It was awful. So from that standpoint, no matter who's playing quarterback for the Ravens, you do feel better, even though we also have to remember, just like we say with Ravens-Steelers, when it is an AFC North opponent, you never truly know, but this is clearly a Bengals team coming to town, not feeling very good about themselves. And, they were coming off their bye on Sunday, and they lost 51-14. Try to process that if you're Marvin Lewis and company.
All right, well, then there's the Harbaugh reports, right? So La Canfora has these reports, and I don't know that it's a report that John Harbaugh's on the hot seat or there would be a mutual parting. I don't know if it's a mutual parting of the ways. This has gone on a long time. It's never pretty at the end. And with the season teetering, with Flacco's health and the future teetering for him, Eric DeCosta coming in, and all of the other parts of this would be an exit strategy right now for John Harbaugh as well, and that's going to become part of this story, especially if they go and lose to the Cincinnati Bengals this week, whether it's Lamar Jackson or RG3 or Joe Flacco or the ghost of Johnny Unitas. If they lose to Cincinnati this week, everything about all of the scenarios here then change, I think, for the quarterback, for the coach, in a lot of ways.
I think you're right. And, as far as, and I'm not even going to just single out Jason La Canfora. Anyone talking about Harbaugh being on the hot seat or speculating about its future, is that really news? Steve Bisciotti acknowledged at the beginning of February that he nearly fired John Harbaugh. So I think we all understood, barring some kind of weird scenario, like let's say if Flacco had ruptured his Achilles in the middle of August, I think we all assumed that this was a playoffs or bust proposition for Harbaugh, and I think even John understood that. Even if he specifically won't address it in those specific terms, I think he understands that. And I think there's even something to be said that perhaps John Harbaugh is almost seeing the writing on the wall and saying, you know what, maybe a fresh start would be best for me, too. And maybe that's kind of the genesis.
It's been a good gig. You talk about rookie quarterbacks, and we talk about a rookie head coach here who, I don't want to say he's going to the Hall of Fame, but if he took over the next gig and won 2 more championships, he would.
Yeah. So I think from that standpoint, I'm all, first of all, and I don't doubt the report, La Canfora's reporting in saying a mutual parting of ways, but I'm always very skeptical of that terminology because I rarely ever think there's a case where both sides are totally on the same page of saying, let's end this. Harbaugh's under contract next year. I don't think it's going to be a case where he says, Steve, you don't have to pay me. That's fine. We're just going to shake hands and part ways. I'd be surprised by that element of it. But if it's a case where Harbaugh feels, I think I get the sense that the Ravens are in transition and getting ready to move on, and they're going to have a new quarterback and a new GM, and maybe it's just best for me to part ways and try to find another situation that's frankly better than this one right now. I think that's a fair position to take, and I think we've all said all along, despite some of Harbaugh's shortcomings, and he's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, I really would be surprised if he doesn't have a job waiting for him almost instantly. Whether it's the Browns, who suddenly look like a pretty, dare I say, pretty decent-looking job at this point, at least relative to how it's been, or any number of other jobs, NFL, or if he has some inkling of wanting to coach at the collegiate level, as has been rumored at various points over the last decade. I think John Harbaugh is going to be fine, is my long-term, my long story short summation of where he stands right now. So from that standpoint, is there some element to this that could end up being mutual? Sure, but I'm always skeptical of fully characterizing it as a mutual parting of ways. Kind of reminds me of a mutual breakup. I mean, how many times is that really the case? It ends up being a case of, it's one person driving it and the other person trying to save some face. And so I'm not buying that part of it 100%, but I do think there is something to the idea of maybe maybe he's even seeing it'd be best for him to move on and kind of reinvigorate himself, re-energize himself, and join a new organization where his message would be a little fresher.
Here's Luke Jones. He's Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. All of this is big picture stuff. Then there is the minutia of actually beating the Cincinnati Bengals this week. And Luke, we've talked so much about the Flacco and the Lamar Jackson situation. That's going to be a daily story all week long. That's going to be the story on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And how's Flacco? Is he going to play? Is he going to get? And this is probably just as confusing to the Bengals. I would expect that that Harbaugh will be at his paranoid height this week as far as who's going to be the quarterback and who's out running around this week, because they want Marvin to be thinking about this all week.
Yeah, it's always a little more difficult when you're talking about a quarterback because it's someone that's so paramount in your organization. So I think it's a case where John and Kevin Byrne probably plays a big part in this. They have to acknowledge that you need to talk about it, but there's a way to talk about it without really saying anything, if you get my point. I mean, you can answer questions cordially. You know the questions are going to come every single day. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, it's one thing if it's Ronnie Stanley or Jimmy Smith or even someone like Marshall Yanda. It's another. It's a totally different animal when it's your quarterback. So the questions are going to come. I expect Harbaugh to answer those questions politely without saying anything of real substance that's going to give it away. Because you're right. With the Ravens being as desperate as they are, and also understanding even with Cincinnati's recent struggles, understanding the Bengals have had their number big time over the last 5 to 6 years, they're going to leave the Bengals guessing as much as possible. And what's different about this compared to at any other point, and maybe to a much smaller degree when Tyrod Taylor was Joe Flacco's backup, but you have a very different, very contrasting type of game plan when Lamar Jackson's the quarterback compared to Joe Flacco. So Harbaugh and the Ravens want to keep either the illusion of Flacco playing, even if he's not going to play. They want to maintain that. And even if Flacco is going to play, they want to maintain the illusion that Lamar Jackson could be a very distinct possibility for not just 5 or 6 plays, but much more than that, and possibly starting altogether. So there's going to be plenty of that gamesmanship at work. And again, I think the organization, they have to be polite about it. It's not, I think I'd be surprised if John Harbaugh just goes up there right away and says, I'm not answering any questions about Joe Flacco whatsoever. There'll be an injury report. I think he'll talk in much more polite terms, but you're right. He's not going to give away any information that could be perceived as an advantage for Cincinnati in preparing for Sunday's game.
Well, this is all about percentages too. Say, can Flacco move at all? How if he's still on crutches on Thursday or Friday, he's not playing. I think that becomes kind of obvious. I think we will go to bed Thursday or Friday knowing whether he's expected to play or not based on whether he's out there moving around. I mean, he's not going to go from crutches on Friday out to throwing the football around on Sunday. I don't think that benefits anybody.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that extreme, I'd be surprised. I mean, to me, what would be interesting is if he's improved, he had treatment over the weekend, Some of the tests came back and said, okay, you don't need surgery. This isn't going to be a long-term thing. It's going to be more of a pain tolerance issue, and it's going to impact your mobility. Then it becomes, all right, is he on the practice field on Wednesday, first of all? If he is, how's he looking? And us media guys that are out there watching the first 20 minutes, they're not going to give us anything to really take away that's going to be conclusive or definitive. But how does he move? How is he able to function in the pocket? Can he step into throws? Can he evade pressure? Can he take his steps to even hand off where the timing is going to be all calibrated? Those are all very real questions. And if it's less than 90%, if it's less than 85%, let's say, at what point do you say this lesser version of Joe isn't going to give us our best chance of winning? So, behind the scenes, and again, they're not going to publicize this, but if Joe's not practicing and if he's limited and all of those different things, then do you ramp up Lamar Jackson and you're just going to run a heck of a lot of zone read, a ton of RPOs? They're going to have design runs for him, different things with Alex Collins, with Ty Montgomery. It becomes a much different game plan for Cincinnati to be ready for. So it's going to be really interesting. But to your point, if Joe's not practicing all week and we get to Friday, I think it's going to be clear who's playing, because Joe's not playing at a high enough level where he just sits out all week and doesn't do anything and then just rolls out of bed and plays on Sunday. Maybe that works for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe that works for Tom Brady. That doesn't work for Joe Flacco in this day and age in 2018. He hasn't played well enough to justify that being your best chance of winning. So it's definitely going to be interesting. There's going to be unknown. I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk unless it's just a case where he's not practicing at all. There's no sign of him in the locker room. There are more reports come out that he's still either on crutches or whatever. Then it becomes a little more clear. But the Ravens are going to try to keep up that veil of mystery as much as they can throughout the week.
Well, there are other issues going on. Our WNST coverage here brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing, sponsor of our community and charity series. Also, they provide me the coffee cup that I put my Kona Blend Rofo coffee in. They've been doing it for 99 3/4 years, almost 100 years. They'll be celebrating that next spring. Don't let it goof on your roof. If you've got a commercial or business project and you got a leaky roof, or you want to learn about solar space, or you just need to get your roof looked at because it's been a while, you need Cole Roofing. Find them at ColeRoofing.com, and you can find them here Thursday as part of our community and charity series. Also brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. They are proud of that, and I know that for sure because every time I walk into a different liquor store, I'm like, how much for that? A lot less over King Liquors. Give the King a ring. Check out the new commercial with Johnny Bev and the King All-Stars at King Discount Liquors, Pulaski Highway in Rosedale. Also, our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. If you're in the market to buy or sell, you need our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. You can learn more at their educational series up on their website at Freedmont.com. We'll also be swabbing for the Bone Mare Registry beginning next week. We're going to have a Raven Live show I'll be telling you about a little bit later on in the week, all brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage. And I think Carl Delmont's going to stop by with some end-of-the-year planning for you as well. Luke Jones is here. He, of course, is Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Luke, there's other things other than the quarterback situation here and the offensive line. Remember last week when that was the biggest story, right? The O-line was problems and the secondary had problems, and we got defensive issues going on here with this team right now and stopping passing across the middle of the field. And here come the Bengals. Well, there's a lot of other moving parts, but the offensive line was sort of the beginning of the problem here. And we haven't said the words Ronnie Stanley, but him coming back would be a big part of beating the Bengals this week, no matter who the quarterback is.
Oh, there's no question about it. And this is why I think for people that consider themselves a little more pro Joe Flacco than other fans, and look, that happens everywhere. But this is why I think people have pointed to that and not really looked at this entire thing as far as what's gone wrong. I mean, the offensive line with Stanley, James Hurst, has missed a lot of time at this point, and you can say, okay, well, Orlando Brown Jr. has come in and played fairly well. He's held his own, and that's a good thing, but not having Hurst gives you one less option that you can plug in at left guard or shuffle some things around and try to get your running game going. But you're right. I mean, the offensive line, I mean, let's face it, Joe Flacco has an injured hip right now because the offensive line didn't do a great job protecting him. And I will say this, the hit where Cam Hayward kind of didn't drive him into the ground, but we saw Flacco land awkwardly. He was offsides on that play, if you recall, but it was still a case of an O-lineman not making his block. So they need to get Stanley back, no matter who the quarterback is. They need to get James Hurst back. I would like to see Orlando Brown stay at right tackle, and I'd like to see what James Hurst can do at left guard and see if that helps their running game some, because whether it's Jackson, whether it's Flacco, this team has to run the football more effectively. There's just no ifs about that. You have to do it. This team is not, Flacco is not the kind of quarterback that's going to sit back there and throw it 50 times and have a lot of success. Very few quarterbacks can do that. So it does begin with the offensive line on the offensive side of the ball. So you're hoping, based on what John Harbaugh said going into the bye week, that Stanley should be ready to go. I know he was out. He was in a walking boot after the Carolina game. He was out of the walking boot early last week before the Ravens broke up and players went off to their various corners of the world for the bye week. So that was a good sign. I know he talked. He was non-committal, but it was very much a coached non-committal in him trying to say nothing about his injury. But there's optimism there. Harbaugh expressed optimism about basically all of their players who have been banged up now looking like they should have a chance to be back against Cincinnati, and that's good news. But, I mean, the offensive line, they've done a really commendable job in pass protection over the course of the season, given some of the challenges that they've had. But they need that to continue, and certainly having Stanley back will help them get back on track in that regard. But they've got to figure out a way to run the ball more effectively. I just don't see this team getting to where it's going if they're going to continue to rank 31st in the NFL in yards per carry. So that's the big key. And then, of course, kind of across the board, both sides of the ball, a number of guys banged up, guys that were playing less than 100% the last couple weeks, a Tony Jefferson, a C.J. Mosley, a Marlon Humphrey. You hope those individuals getting a week off helps the defense get back closer to where it was before this 3-game slide, and just helps everyone kind of feel refreshed. I mean, we talked about this after the Carolina game, how tired they looked, how slow they looked, and we both talked about the fact that this team started training camp in mid-July, and that's not an excuse, because I think John Harbaugh did an adequate job getting some of these guys rest and not throwing them into old school 2-a-day type of training camp. We know it's not like that anymore, but there is still a mental grind. There is still some value to some of these guys being able to unplug for 4 or 5 days like they were, and we'll see how it plays out. Not going to be easy, but certainly coming off the bye week and knowing how the Ravens have historically played coming off their bye under John Harbaugh, I think there's optimism in that regard, even if there's plenty of uncertainty at the quarterback position.
Well, and then there's all the wide receivers and how all this works with Lamar Jackson, right? Like, if he's going to go in there and throw it around, who will be his preferred receiver? How will this – we've not seen this, right? Like, every time he's in there, the last thing we think he's going to do is throw the football, right? Like, he's in there to sort of run it. Flacco's in there to be that Canadian goose out on the outside. I would like to see what 4 quarters are like. Hey, I'd like to see it more next year or the year after that, as opposed to against San Diego next month or whoever. Chargers, LA. I'm still going to call him San Diego.
Yeah.
I saw Shannon Sharp call him San Diego.
Everyone still does it. It's hilarious.
It's fine. I'm going to call him San Diego.
I do too.
I don't call the Colts Baltimore anymore, but that's all right. I mean, we'd be very confused with the Rams because I don't know whether to call them LA, St. Louis. Just when you get used to one, you have to go back to the other, kind of like Oakland and LA. Yeah. But as far as Lamar Jackson running an offense, and doing it for 60 minutes, what it would look like, I don't even know. I mean, I literally don't know. I tend to think he doesn't throw the ball well because he doesn't throw the ball, and if they wanted him to throw the ball, he would. But if he starts this week, he's going to have to throw the ball 25 or 30 times minimum. And what would that look like, and who would it be to, and how would he throw the ball? I know when he throws the ball, it's unique because the ball comes out of there like a rocket. I mean, it's a completely different look, feel to every part of what Lamar Jackson would look like playing against Cincinnati this week.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting if we're going to just work under the assumption that he's going to play. And again, we'll find out as we get deeper into the week. But it really is an unknown, and that's why I've kind of laughed at people that have either said he's an instant upgrade over Flacco, and these are people that clearly aren't Joe Flacco fans, or on the flip side, anyone who just says they're completely done. The guy isn't an NFL quarterback. It was a wasted pick. Look at the throw he made in Carolina. Darted the ball in front of Willie Snead. I think both of those extreme positions, I think at this point, are silly. And it's just based off wanting to have a strong opinion about something that, frankly, you don't have enough of an education about. I have no idea how Lamar Jackson's going to fare. My educated guess, based on what we've seen, because he has played enough to get a general idea, I think their running game will be better. And it's just the simple numbers of it, because you have a quarterback who, with some of these RPOs, with some of the zone reads, you have a quarterback who is a threat to run that Joe Flacco isn't remotely of a threat to run. So I think they'll be better in that regard.
Well, that changes the front seven, on the other side, for sure. I mean, it changes everything about what Marvin would have to do to prepare.
Right, no question. Now, when I say that, how much better? Because, they've averaged below 4 yards per carry. Do I think they'll be above 4 yards per carry with Jackson as the quarterback? Sure. Do I think it's going to be 6 or 7 yards per carry where they don't have to throw the ball at all? No, of course not. I don't think it's going to be that effective running. So it goes back to what you said. He is going to have to make plays with his arm. And I will remind everyone, especially people that aren't on the Lamar Jackson bandwagon and people that were anti that pick and people that are skeptical, he threw from the pocket a lot at Louisville. It's college. I understand that. But this wasn't just a guy who ran and threw the ball 5 or 10 times a game. He threw plenty. But what we saw in the spring, what we saw in the summer, based solely on that, I would say I'm not very optimistic. But he also has, behind the scenes, without the media there, frankly, without a lot of his teammates even there, because a lot of it's come after practice, he, along with quarterbacks coach James Urban and Robert Griffin III, and Marty Morningwig to a lesser degree, but they've worked on different elements of his development as a quarterback after practices, and he's done a heck of a lot of work. And how much of that has brought improvement over the last 2 months, 2+ months, I have no idea. But that's such an unknown that I'm not going to sit here and say definitively that he's not going to be able to throw the football at all, because I don't know. I'm not afraid to admit I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to say that I know. My hunch on this, based on what we've seen and based on what we know, and also throw in the fact that the Ravens coaching staff hasn't exactly been overly willing to let him throw the ball when he's been in the game, that would lead you to believe that there probably isn't a ton of confidence in him throwing. But maybe he has made a lot of strides over the last 2 months, and maybe he will go out there against Cincinnati and provides a spark for the running game, of course, but also make some plays with his arm. I wouldn't be stunned by that. I would be stunned if he goes out there and plays like the instant upgrade that some Joe Flacco haters think he's going to be. I would be surprised if he's that good, but I'm not going to sit here and say that he's not going to be able to do some things as a passer. I think that it's going to be a more limited game plan. I think, to your point, envisioning him throwing the ball more than 20 or 25 times probably isn't a great game plan, but we have to see how it plays out. And, again, the good news is with Cincinnati and Oakland being where they are defensively and just where they are as a football team, Bengals, of course, not in the same category as Oakland, who's just a disaster. If he has to play the next couple weeks and Joe has to miss some time, I'm not going to say it's impossible for Lamar Jackson to go out there and play well. I don't know. And I think based on any outsider, media, fans, even opponents looking at the game tape, I think there's just so much unknown to really try to predict how this is going to go beyond what should be a safe assumption. They should, and I emphasize should, be able to run more effectively with him in there, because we've seen that happen on a number of occasions through the first 9 games of the season.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Pizza John's. My mom's favorite pizza, my wife's favorite pizza, my favorite cheesesteak subs are down at Pizza John's. They've been doing it for 50 years now, back River Neck Road in Essex. You know about them. You've seen me eating it, drinking it, talking about it, and, of course, the delicious pizza that I've been enjoying for, I'm 50 and they're 50. I think I've been eating their pizza for about 47 years, if I'm not mistaken. I probably, 71 or 72, I was down there at the carryout on Back River Neck Road. Get on down to Pizza John's and see what all the fuss is about. Also, our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $5 down and $10 a month. Never any commitment and always judgment-free. They provide our morning newspaper, comes to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. Also brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, where they're racing this weekend. They have a fantastic new sports bar down there with a gigantic TV, great crab cakes, great food, great vibe. Get down there, bet the ponies, see what all the fuss is about. Watch some college football on Saturday or some NFL on Sunday. They are racing this weekend at Laurel. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. He is Luke at WNST.net, and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. Together we're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And, of course, if there's any breaking news at all, you're going to get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here from 3 until 5 on Thursday, driving you home with the SSV on WNST. The bye is over. And we got a lot of Flacco, a lot of Harbaugh, a lot of Cincinnati Bengals ahead, and we're still waiting on the Orioles to do something. You'll get that first on the WNST text service. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.